All right, so the scoring rubric. I know I sent that out. I made one change to it today, actually, and we are including copies of this in with your proposal, so you'll have an up-to-date copy. There's 10 components that we're going to score people on, and they can get between 0 and 12 points per component, with the highest score, perfect score, being 75 points. And if you've already had a chance to read through it, or even if you haven't, there are sort of some guidelines to help people determine how many points to assign each proposal. You don't have to use those if you don't want to. You can kind of use your gut, but there are people who are helping us review these who don't have a lot of experience, and we thought it would be helpful to give some guidance around, something that, if you can score something between 0 and 6 points, what does a good proposal look like? What would get, the higher end of that scale versus the lower end? So we're going to walk through that right now with a couple examples. And you can see from this with the maximum point values, there are some sections that we are giving a little bit higher value to based on the number of points that we have assigned to each one. So, for example, the problem statement. You're limited to 50 words. That's not something you can do a lot with, so we're not giving that as many points as, say, the explanation of their approach, where that one can get a maximum of 12 points. So we've sort of assigned point values based on the importance of the section and the things that we really wanted people to focus on as they were reviewing them, what we found to be important. The problem statements again, and there are a couple sections in the proposal that have a word limit. You do not have to worry about counting up the words to make sure they stuck to those. We will take care of that on our end. We put those in there so people would stay short and sweet and to the point. Because again, these are $5,000 grants, and we didn't want people spending a lot of time and energy on a relatively small amount of money. So the
That's
problem,
funny.
What?
It's kind of funny because I could have used all 250 words to just articulate the evidence for why we wanted to do what we wanted to do.
Well, yeah. There were a couple people who emailed me or called me and said, "Can I have 300 words?" Like, really try hard to keep them. We really want short and sweet and to the point. So it can be tough.
Thank you for not making us count words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're welcome. You also, and you'll learn this later on, but you also don't have to check their evidence either. So you don't have to look up every article that they cite. We'll take care of that as well. Because that could take a while. All right, so the problem statement. If the problems or the population experiencing the problem is vaguely defined, those are the types of problem statements that would record to the lower end of this scale. Problems that are clearly defined, the population is very specific, those are the ones that would receive the higher number of points. So we've got a couple problem statements here. Here's one. I'll give you a moment to read it. Okay, and again, feel free to just say, on a scale of that 1 to 6 scale, what would you score this problem statement if you read it in a proposal?
It's just that one sentence.
Yep.
Okay. One.
I thought we'd start easy.
Vague.
Yeah, it's very vague. There's no population. The problem is extremely vague. And here is a second example.
I give that a higher score.
Yeah. I would too.
Yeah. Yep. That one definitely. You've got a clearly defined problem.
How much and it's missing in how much and how you're going to measure it.
Well, that's true, but we did not ask them to define that in the problem statement.
Okay. Yeah.
We asked them just to state the problem they were trying to address and the population experiencing the problem.
So would this be something that would be like a 5 maybe?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Definitely. All right. the next section of the proposal, we ask them to identify at least 2 factors that contribute to the problem they mentioned in that first section that they want to influence, and to describe why these factors contribute to the problem. So in this section, we're going to ask you to look at how well did they describe the factors and how well they talked about how they contribute to the problem. So if the description is unclear, incomplete, you would score it lower on the scale. If there's an adequate description, but there's some detail missing, that's where you would give them kind of that middle of 4 to 6 points. And then this one can get as many as 9 points. And that's if they've written the description. It's clear, it's compelling, and it's relevant. So we'll look at one of the 2 factors. We've only got one here as an example. But if you read this one factor in a proposal, how would you rate this one?
Wow.
Hmm.
It lacks some meat.
Yeah?
Mhm.
I think I would put that down in that 1 to 3 category somewhere.
1 to 3? Okay.
One, it's only one, isn't it just really one factor?
Yeah, it is one of the 2.
Yeah.
So maybe they really knocked it out of the park on the second one.
You can hope.
Positive, yeah.
Or they can hope.
Okay, let's look at a second one. What do you think about this one?
Well, it's definitely got some compelling information in there. I'd probably put it more higher middle part maybe.
Okay.
Would be a section where you'd be looking for some percentages and things like that, or just making more broader statements? Is that?
Yeah, this
Okay.
section, if they include the percentages, like if they had said 70% of teens in Erie County feel unsure,
Right.
that would definitely put them up into that, I think, 8 to 9 range.
Sure. Okay.
So yeah, this would be one place where data would definitely fit in well. So you get an idea of how many people are affected.
So you're looking at 5 to 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's skills and confidence, too? I mean, that needs a better description of what they mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. This one's definitely in the middle. And this is something as well that, Erie County is not in our region, but that's why we grouped our reviewers with proposals in the counties in which they live, because I have absolutely no idea. I couldn't even estimate how many teenagers might even live in Erie County. And so this is one of the sections where your knowledge of your communities would really help, because you could say, wow, I know there's this many teens in Erie County, or, wow, is that high that this would be a problem, among this percentage of people. So this is one of the sections again where, your knowledge of the community can also affect how you score the proposals. And that's again why we try to group people together in regions that they are familiar with. All right, so the approach really gets at the what they're going to do, what evidence-based practice are the grantees going to use to address the factors described in section 1B. So again, score lower on the scale if the approach is not described well, it's unclear, it's incomplete. And again, that middle range, 4 to 6, if it's adequate, but there's some meat missing or there's some detail missing. And then 7 to 9 for those that really give a clear, compelling, and relevant explanation. This section also gets sort of +3 for bonus points for a description that includes evidence that the approach is effective. So because we're looking at evidence-based prevention practices, we wanted people to cite their evidence. We don't necessarily want pages and pages and pages, but if they can cite research studies or peer-reviewed journal articles, for example, another way to cite evidence that something is effective is to be on the, for example, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. I always just say SAMHSA, Registry of Best Practices.
Get that out either.
Or approved by, sometimes something might be approved for use in federally funded programs by XYZ department of the government. So those are some things that would get credit for evidence in these proposals. It might also be something as simple as personal communication from the person who created the program or someone who has used an awareness campaign and can say, here is evidence that this approach worked for a community like this. So those are some of the things that would get those extra 3 bonus points for evidence. And again, you don't have to check their evidence. You don't have to read all the journal articles. I know at least one proposal that we received included the journal articles with their proposal, which is great for our use, but you guys we're not going to send those to you. So if they've cited the evidence, if you're interested, please feel free to follow up and read more, but it's not required. Okay, so here's a sample approach for that first sort of proposal that we've been looking at. Take a moment to read that. Okay, well, so on that same scale, 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, what would you give this one?
So this is Rebecca, and I think I would score this higher if I knew what all those acronyms meant. Yeah.
That is actually funny you should mention that. One of the things that I am going to include is a acronym list of things that might show up, like these kinds of things. I know NIDA is the National Institute for Drug Addiction. CSAP is, come on, Lisa Myers, help me out here. No.
Center for Sexual Abuse Prevention.
Yeah. CSAP is the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention. OJJDP is Juvenile Justice, maybe?
Yeah.
Anyway, one of the things I'm going to do
the only one I knew.
Include a list of these acronyms as well as a list of degrees, because someone had signed an email to me with their degree being an MNO. And I was like, what is that? So I'm going to look through the proposals and get you guys a list of what those acronyms are and then also what those degrees are, because later on when we look at who's going to be running the project and we look at their qualifications, sometimes people might just put that someone is, for example, an MSW, which implies a lot of skills if you know what those letters stand for. So I'm going to include those just to help the reviewers with the alphabet soup, which comes along with most nonprofits.
I don't see where this sample approach describes why it's the best approach for this particular problem, though.
It does not.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other things I noticed too is that it says they're going to help parents develop, but yet there's modules for children, but yet they're not saying if they're doing any of those modules with children.
Right.
So it's kind of vague and mentioning it, but not quite explaining it.
Yep.
So is it a 14-week program for the parents or for the children?
Yep. And they also talked about parents kind of in their problem, in their factor, but children weren't mentioned, but now suddenly they are. So yeah, this one definitely would get kind of on the lower edge of the scale. But would you give it the 3 bonus points for including evidence?
Well, yeah, I would, because it's a 14-week program that is approved for use in federal and state-funded programs by all of those, the alphabet soup.
By the alphabet soup, yep. So they might score low. They might get sort of 1 to 3 points for their description, but they would get the 3 extra points for including the evidence, even if they didn't make a very good case.
Mm-hmm.
But only if they spelled them all out.
Yep. Yeah. That would take up the 250 words right there.
Yeah.
All right. So here is the second approach.
As much as I don't like safe dates, that's a really good approach.
I don't know who Donna Dickman is, but other than that,
I do.
Yeah.
Pretty good. I guess mine would be that earlier in their problem statement, they really talked about doing all the kids in the high school. Now it's at least only 20.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think part of that is as you go through so the problem statement kind of looks at the problem across the community. The approach statements are really going to get into what's realistic for us to do with our $5,000 in 1 year.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I mean, that's really, the problem statement is the broad brush. It's why you chose to do this, and then you sort of, winnow down, if you will, what you're actually going to do about that problem. So this makes sense to me.
Reality.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
You can't do an entire school system at $5,000.
Yeah. Yep.
I guess I would push back and want to see a little bit bigger of an impact in that year than just 20 high school students.
Okay.
Although, I mean, I have to really depend on the author of this proposal to do what's reasonable within their capacity, and that might come later, looking at their capacity.
Yeah.
This is
and I guess the one thing that's missing for me here is they talk about each school. So I don't know how many schools they're talking about. Is it high schools in that county? So 10 students in each, which is a somewhat low number. But you know what I mean? I mean, again, with each school, that's something that we just don't know. And the teacher team, how many teachers are actually doing this? Maybe as we get through, we'll find out how they're recruiting and training those teacher teams. But at this point, I don't know how many schools, how many teachers are on the team.
Yeah.
Well, or how they're
choosing the students. If they're only choosing, if only 20 students are going to get the curriculum, how are they choosing the students? And is it stigmatizing to them?
And that may come later. That that's what I'm saying. That those details may not be in this part. You almost sort of, and usually that's what I do when I review proposals. I read through the whole thing and then go back and try to score because often you don't know the answers until you read the whole thing, and then you've scored and you say, oh, now I find out.
Right. Yep. And also, we ask people for 2 factors that contribute to the problem, and this approach only addresses one of those factors. So in most of these proposals, you're going to have a couple different things going on as well. So it may be that on top of the other work they're going to be doing to address the other factor, they can only get safe dates to 20 high school students. So,
because it may not be, for example, in a class, it may be something that's a non-academic activity within that school that we'll find out that's how they're doing it.
Yep. All right, and I apologize to the people that we can't hear. You can feel free to type comments in the comment field, and people can read those, or you can send them privately, and I will speak up for you. Okay, the next section of the proposal asks for process objectives, which I think kind of gets at some of the things that we were just talking about, like how are they going to recruit those teachers? How are they going to recruit those students? What kinds of things are they going to be doing? We ask them for, again, at least 3 specific objectives. Each objective must include a deadline, who will complete the task, which might be at the client level or it might be at the organization level. So, for example, one objective might be to recruit Rebecca Klein will recruit 4 teacher teams to do the training by May 2013. Okay, that gives you a who at that organization level. So who at the agency is responsible. The other types of who that might show up are client level. So 20 students will complete the training by May 2013. That would be an example of kind of who completes that task. So there's 2 different things going on. And then also, which of the factors does this influence? So as we look at the objectives, the first thing we want to kind of check is, did they include all of the information that we asked for? Does each objective have these 3 things? Okay, the deadline, who will complete it, and which factor will it influence? Okay, so here's one sample objective.
Wow.
So it gets a 0.
Yeah.
Look at the 0. Yep, look at the 0.
Pretty much 0.
Because there's no deadline, right? They don't say by May 2013, by October. There's nothing for us to know that they've put in a deadline. They do have a who, which are the parents and children in their community. That's a client level person. And then we know which factor it will address. Okay? But we don't have that deadline that says, this is when we will have it done by. Now let's look at our second sample proposal.
That's okay.
Yep. We've got a deadline. We know when it's going to happen by. We know
What is going to
how many, we know who is going to do it. And we know what factor it will address. So that one would.
Well, and it also goes back to one of the other questions we had when we were talking about 20 students. That now they're saying in each high school.
Yep. Yeah. So it is. This one gives a little bit more detail. You also have a little bit more information that this is, 10 sessions. So the number of students who can get through that in 1 year, that puts it into a little bit better perspective as well.
So Christine. Hey, Christine.
Yeah.
So this would be 1 point. Since they met all 3, if they hit all 3 points, you would give this 1 point.
Yep.
Is that correct? Okay.
That is correct. And so since they have to do 3 objectives, they would get 3 points total.
Gotcha.
Okay, because it says on this next page, I'm sorry, never mind.
Okay. All right. And Beth asked about outcome measurements. We're going to address their official evaluation after the grants are awarded. That's one of the things that we're going to work on in the afternoon of the October 5th. Is we're going to lead them through a formal evaluation process. There are going to be things in the evaluation that HealthPath requires them to collect, and things in the evaluation that they will be able to collect based on their individual projects. So instead of dealing with the outcome measurements ahead of time, we're going to deal with them after the grants are awarded. Okay, so first with the objectives, we wanted to look at, basically follow directions. We want to give them credit for following along with the proposal guidelines and getting all of the things in. The next thing we're going to look at are the actual objectives themselves. What content are in them, is in them? Are they clear and complete? Do they lack detail? Are they well described and appropriate? So we're going to look at the objectives again, but really look this time at the content of them rather than just the required components. Okay. And this is the same one that we saw earlier that was deadlineless. So on that scale, 1 to 3, unclear and complete, 4 to 6, adequate but no detail, and 7 to 9, well described, appropriate. Where would this one fall?
On the lower end, I think.
Mm-hmm.
1 or 2?
Yeah, 1 or 2. Yeah. And again, you're going to be looking at all of their objectives kind of in this group. You're not going to give each objective its own points on this content section. You're going to give one that sort of covers all 3 of them. Jane brings up a good point that, we don't have evidence that strengthening families provides coping skills. They didn't make that case earlier in their approach statement. So this is one of those things where it's like, okay, this seems like a good objective, but is this actually going to do what you think it's going to do? You haven't provided us that evidence. So, good point, Jane. Okay. And our second objective. Again, on that same scale, 1 to 3, unclear and complete, 4 to 6, adequate but lacking detail, and 7 to 9, well described, appropriate, and related to the factors.
I think I'd give this somewhere between 7 and 9. Maybe not all 9, but I mean, it's better than the middle category for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't. I wanted the sentence to go on where it says this will help address the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the outcome.
By adding, after perpetrators of abuse by da 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 da, and it just kind of hangs out there. And is it addressing an outcome?
It doesn't really address the outcome.
It's addressing a problem.
Yeah, it says it's going to do this, but how are they going to measure whether this worked in terms of if the outcome really did help the students, if it really actually worked in terms of how they felt with helping their friends or how to confront friends who were perpetrators of abuse. I mean, it's sort of like just because 20 students complete this 10-session curriculum doesn't actually mean that the students will be impacted. I mean, unless you measure that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a good point. So it should be more specific to that 20-student group in each high school.
And how are they going to measure it? Like with a pre or post test questionnaire, or
a separate. I guess my question is because I don't know if there's limits to the amount of words per objective, because what it really should say is this will help address the problem that many teens. I mean, it's the problem here, not the outcome. So there may be another objective.
There may be another section on outcomes
that says each of the 20 students will complete a pre or post test or something to measure the, that would be to me sort of the next objective. So your first objective is you get the kids into the class and you do the 10 curriculum. Your second objective is how you're going to measure it. And you know what I mean? You have a third objective for, I would guess recruiting schools, teachers, something like that, because you've got to have some structure to the project. But
and I think that was part of the application difficulty was that the objectives, it didn't ask for SMART objectives. By when and how is it going to be measured? It really just asked for those three elements that Christine mentioned.
Right, and I think this is one of the times when evaluation jargon sort of starts rearing its head, ugly or otherwise, because the objectives that we asked for are not necessarily the same ones that we would ask for in a full evaluation. And that evaluation is happening again after the grants are awarded. So we didn't ask them to plan out those evaluations right now. The objective is really process objectives, things that they will do to address their factors. And they use the word outcome in their proposal, but really that was factors. So if you take that word outcome and you replace it with the word factor, that ties back into section 1B, the contributing factors.
And Christine, is the reason for that because you want to have some consistent evaluation measurements across all the proposals rather than having everybody sort of say what they're going to do on their own?
That's correct.
Was that the reason? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I was going to ask, is why you chose that particular way to evaluate.
Yep, that, and also because these, again, are $5,000 grants. So instead of having them spend the time doing a full proposal before the grant was even awarded, if they don't receive a grant, then they've done that work without that. So it was kind of a twofold thing. One is because, yes, we are going to give them an evaluation that they follow that includes some things that they're going to measure on their own and some things that we're going to ask them to measure. So it was easier on our end to do that after the proposals were in, so we could see what kinds of things we're funding rather than spending a lot of time including everything that might come in. The other thing, too, is that, and I just lost that thought. That went out of my head. Sorry about that. I can't remember what I was going to say. I had a thought fly in and fly out. So if it comes to me, I will come back to that. All right. Any other questions on, and again, I think this objectives part might be a little sticky, especially if you have experience with other proposals. The objectives that we're looking at here may not align with the objectives that you've looked at in the past. Okay.
So you're saying, what was the word you used? Factors instead of objectives?
Factors. Yeah, I mean these are sort of the process. Right. They're not really outcomes. They're more process. It's their to-do list. I guess that's one way to say it. It's things they're going to do. I remember my other point is that with these evidence-based practices, they all have expected outcomes. So if you implement safe dates, you can expect this impact on the people who have gone through the program. And that's part of also what we're going to look at in the evaluation. So because these are evidence-based practices and they have been proven, there are certain things that we can expect to happen to these 20 students who complete the curriculum. So, and yeah, safe dates is measured with pre and post testing. And I know some of the other ones too will have things as well that are involved. And that's one of the things that we're going to wrap up into that evaluation, which we'll give to the grantees in October. So did I make it worse for everyone, or are we all okay on this one?
Good.
We're good, or I'm good, except just putting a star there saying not objectives.
Yeah, they're processes.
Yeah.
You know, and again, that's one of those things that I think everyone who deals with evaluation kind of has a different definition for what they use, you know, what they call an objective. So if you have any questions as you're reading through these proposals, feel free to call me or send me an email, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it. And also when we meet to review these together, that may be some of the things that as a group, that the different groups will process as well. So, okay. The next section looks at the organizational capacity. So do the people who are proposing this project, do they seem qualified? Do they have the relevant experience? And do they have the right partners at the table, for example? Okay. So individual number 1. So 1 to 3, the individual does not seem qualified or have relevant experience. 4 to 6 points, they seem qualified, but their experience is unclear or maybe poorly described. And 7 to 9 points, they really seem qualified and have significant experience doing this same thing.
I would say like a 4. I mean, he seems like qualified, but it's not. He doesn't list it. They don't list the experience, like how many years or what. Maybe even a 3. Is his education, his title? Well, they say his title, but there could be more
really
about him.
Amount of time that he worked at the agency. I mean, it could be 2 years versus 10 years. There'd be different experience there.
Yeah. Question from the silent partners in our panel here today. Since we are reviewing people in our areas and we know John Doe, can we count that? Absolutely, you can. I think this is kind of one of those things where if you know somebody, I previously worked at the Health Foundation of Greater Cincinnati, and as we reviewed proposals, that was one thing that we would look at is, do the people running this program have a reputation in the community for doing good work? For, are there some things that sometimes they're good things that you might know of about the people in your community. Sometimes there might be some red flags. So this is definitely, again, one of the sections that we're going to rely on the people who are reviewing the proposals to help us know the local communities in which we're working. So you can definitely count that. But don't, though, fill in too many blanks into a vague proposal either. If they did not do a really good job of describing the person's experience, I guess maybe stick them in the 4 to 6 section rather than bumping them up to a 7 to 9.
This doesn't speak to his ability to implement a curriculum either.
Right. I mean, he's run classes, but were they any good?
Yeah.
What were you
up for?
Yeah, there's things like that too. Okay. And our second description for an individual.
Much better.
Yes.
I think I'd rate this pretty high, actually, just based on, I mean, it's got all of her credentials and her experience and what she will be doing for this project. So I'd say 8, 9, somewhere higher end.
We don't need to know whether she graduated summa cum laude, right?
No, we don't need to know that.
And down the road, that means what?
Exactly.
Grade point.
I'll remember that the next time I write up a grant.
Yeah.
I need to be like, you don't want to know my GPA.
Yeah, no, you don't need to know if they were summa cum laude, but this one definitely is on that higher end. And again, with the last one, it didn't really talk about what he was going to be doing, his role in the project. There wasn't much description there, but this one, you definitely get the sense that the person knows what they're doing and have a clearly defined role on the project.
Yeah, and this finally starts to put some information around the project about how it will actually run in terms of serving as a liaison between the teacher and local resources, the fact that there's going to be some kind of peer-to-peer work with, and that will be facilitated among the school teams themselves, that kind of stuff. So that's really helpful information, I think. Yeah,
and again, you guys won't be reading these proposals slide by slide as we're doing today, kind of jumping around. So yeah, I think if you read through the whole thing once before you start diving into the rubric, you'll probably get a better sense for the entire project overall. Hopefully.
Well, it tells us that there's going to be continuing commitment to the program, not just his name on a piece of paper.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, the partners list. So we asked people, given again that these are smaller grants and they are looking at impact in the community, we assume there are going to be partners who are helping the applicant organization do these projects. And we've asked them to list the partners that they are asking to be part of the project. So there's two things that we need to look at for the partners. The first is the list itself. Does it make sense? The second is the letters of commitment that the partners submitted. And so we're going to look at those two things separately. This first section really just looks at that list in section 3B and asks you the question of, does it make sense? Are there key partners missing? I think one of the big ones would be if the project is going to happen in the schools, but the principal or a school administrator is not listed as a partner, that would be something that you'd say, okay, how are you going to get into the school if you don't have the principals or an administrator already on board? So does that list of partner make sense? Are all of the key people there? So that's what this first section is going to look at, this first scoring section. Okay. So back to our first example that we've been looking at with the parenting skills project, which their problem statement talked about parents who come into the local job center talking about problems that they have at home with their kids. Here is their sample partner list.
Well, isn't that them? So there are no partners? I mean, it's the job center that's doing this, right?
It's an agency that works with the job center.
Okay. So the job center is their only partner then?
Yep. Are there any other partners? If this grant were happening in your community, for example, is there somebody else you would expect to see on this list?
Who is? I'm sorry, Christine. Who's the applicant?
It is an organization that works with families, and it's basically a social services organization.
Well, and they're working on
parenting skills.
Yeah.
Yep. We've got somebody typed in Jobs and Family Services.
Yeah.
Is one DJFS. Might be somebody missing.
Mental health, maybe?
A parent.
Mental health.
Children's Services, the local domestic violence center.
Yep.
I mean, it obviously depends on what kinds of agencies would be in your community, but those would certainly be some of the other ones you'd want as partners, I would think.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm going to push back, and I'm going to say, strategically and with $5,000, am I going to create a new collaborative, or am I going to look to the collaborations I already have? And so it's kind of sad that maybe the Job Center is the only collaborative partner for this. And yeah, I agree. The Domestic Violence Center, Job and Family Services should be, right?
Yeah.
Well, depending on how you're defining partner.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it could be that, they're connecting with, if there's a local domestic violence coordinating council that could have all those players there that they could be a part of as well.
Yep. Family first. Family first might be fine.
Those kinds of things, yeah.
And again, this is where it's going to, where your knowledge of your local community is going to kind of come into play. And it's also what the group meetings will help us kind of pull out. But most of go ahead.
So this is Rebecca again. Are the reviewers allowed to make any recommendations?
Yeah, definitely. You can.
Because proposal, I would think that at least connecting with your Family and Children's First Council, if you're going to be talking about parenting, would be a really important connection.
Yes, it would, and that's one of the things is each section not only gives you a place to put a score, but also where you can write comments. So if you have a suggestion like that, you can definitely put that in. Like, why is the Family and Children First Council not on your list? They would be a great partner for you to work with, and we'll pass those along.
Or your domestic violence task force or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Okay, and here's the sample partner list for the second grant.
My guess. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
My guess is that these are all of the high schools in Erie County.
Yep, that would be my guess too.
But should we not also have like who's involved? Like it's the principal
individual.
Yeah.
That part will come for sure with the letters of commitment, I think, that we'll look at in the later section. We didn't necessarily ask them for the specific person. Well, actually, and I think we did. I think there's more to this section that we asked for. We asked for a contact name and address in the thing. I didn't include those here just for space and time. But we do ask them for a contact person at that school. And that person is the one who sends in the letters of commitment, which we'll look at later.
Okay.
So.
And here, for example, again, you talk about local knowledge. I happen to know that the domestic violence program in Erie County is already doing education in all of the high schools. So even if this was a different program, it would seem to me that you would want them as a partner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you're not duplicating services or something like that, because if they're not on the list, that means do they not even know about it? And when they walk into Huron High School next year and there's another program, are they going to be surprised? Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that, to me, that would be a critical piece.
Yes.
Yep. That's something that I know because of local knowledge. But even with that, if you're dealing with teens and domestic violence and you've got a social worker at United Way in the high schools, if you have a disclosure, what happens to that disclosure? Is there a referral source? So that would be another partner I would want to think about who you might want to include.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Nancy, actually, that this proposal that we're looking at is the sample proposal we included back in April as a sample proposal, and I believe it's for that exact program you were just talking about.
Oh, good.
So yes, they know that they're doing this because they're actually doing it. So. We asked back when we were putting together a sample to send out to the applicants to give them an idea of what we were looking for. We borrowed a proposal that had been successful for funding that pretty much asked for everything that we were going to ask for. So That may be why it seems familiar to you. But yeah, again, this is where your local knowledge definitely will help us fill in some of those blanks that we're not able to know because we're not in all 36 counties. We don't know them as well as we'd like to, which is why we wanted the volunteer proposal readers to help us fill that in. Okay, the budget section. I don't have a sample budget for you. We don't ask them for a lot of information on the budget. It's really their budget for the project. You know what? I forgot one thing on partner lists. We have a couple collaboratives who are applying for funding. And for example, one collaborative has 40 partners who are all going to play some role on the project. We did not ask them for 40 letters of commitment. Because as part of the collaborative, it's their job to work together on some of these things. So if that applies to an organization that you're reviewing a proposal for, we will let you know that when you get the proposal, and you'll look at the letters of commitment at least in a slightly different way. Because again, instead of having them send in 40 letters of commitment, we ask them either for one letter from the head of the collaborative saying, yes, all of the partners are on board, or for sample memorandums of understanding that they use among their partners. So for some of those collaboratives, they can get pretty big. So it's just a quick FYI. Okay, the budget. We don't want you to be accountants. We don't want you to go through all of the lines on the budget and really look at it and pull them apart. What we kind of want is, does this budget seem reasonable? Is it complete? Is it adequate for the project? Are there things, example, that are missing? Okay. If, for example, it mentions a website, is there a line item in the budget for web development and maintenance? Do the costs seem reasonable for the area in which the grantee is working? So we have a lot of different types of counties. There are urban, suburban, rural. There's multi-county initiatives. There's people who are going to be in Columbus. So, do these make sense? Okay. And as you look through, and again, we're just going to ask you to look at the budget for the proposed project. You're not going to have to look at the organization's entire budget and look at that kind of information. We're going to take care of that. But we really just want you guys to look at the budget for the project and see if it makes sense. Okay? And again, this is one of those things I think where your knowledge of your local community and how much things cost will come into play, and then also what the group discussion will pull in. And again, you don't need to be an accountant. Put your calculator away, Lisa Myers.
I knew you were thinking of me. I probably would analyze it. You wouldn't have said that.
You can if you want. But we don't need you to go into a whole lot of detail. Just really look at it and see if it makes sense and if costs seem reasonable for a project of the scope that they described. And it may be that they were not specific enough for you to get a really good idea of if the budget is complete and clear and adequate, and you would rank that accordingly. Letters of commitment are another one of those that has two parts to it. The first is we ask them for letters of commitment from all of the partners that they listed in Section 3B. So the first thing we want to know is, were they able to get all of those letters from their partners? Okay. The second thing is, what is the content of those letters? Okay. So if they included letters for less than half of the partners listed in 3B, except in the case of those coalitions, which I had mentioned previously, they would get 0 points. If the letters of commitment are included for at least half but not all of the partners, they'd get 1 point. And if the letters of commitment are included for all of their partners, they would get the full 3 points. So it's really just counting them up and making sure, did they get everybody's letter? The second, that was the slide on collaboratives. So we'll let you know again if it applies to your particular proposal. If you're not going to be receiving letters of commitment from all of the partners. we asked specifically for letters of commitment, not necessarily just support. We want to make sure that the partners know what they are committing to. Right? Do they understand what is expected of them? And do they understand the project and what they're going to have to provide? So we are going to ask you to look at the letters of commitment. And again, you'll be scoring them as a group, not necessarily each letter individually, to see if the partners understand the project. I don't have sample letters of commitment in the interest of time. But you will receive all of the letters that we've received from the applicants in your packet. So do they show, what level of understanding do the partners show? Do they know what they're getting into? Mm-hmm. So that is the last section of the rubric. Okay. Also make sure that the letters give a clear indication of what's expected. Financial might be, they're going to donate, X amount of money, or if it's in kind, or especially for school districts and organizations like that, are they giving access to the people who need to be involved in the project? Those would be the things that we want you to look at for that last section of the content of the letters. All right, so that's the rubric. Walk through real quick. Again, I'm recording this session, so we'll put it online so you can look at it again as you're going through the proposals if there's something you want to look at or refresh your memory on, etc. We'll have that available for you. I, of course, am available by email or phone if you need anything. Will all the possible scores be on the rubrics? Yes, everything that was on those slides is printed on the rubric right above the section, if that's your question, Jane. So you'll know, like those, if it's 1 to 3 points, if the problem or population is vaguely defined, all of that is spelled out on the rubric. So hopefully that will give you everything you need. I've also created a PDF form of it. You'll get paper copies in your packet, but if you prefer to type instead of write, I'll have one that you can type into your computer, a PDF version, if you'd rather do it that way than writing it all out. And then the first page of the rubric kind of just has a summary, score summary. If you can transfer your comments from the later sections onto that first page, it'll just help us later on with the housekeeping of tabulating all of the responses. Any other questions?
When will we get the proposals?
You will get the proposals. We're going to mail them out today. Okay. And we hope you have them by Friday. It's why we asked for your home address, so that if your mail delivery at work comes in at 5 o'clock, your packet of proposals will be waiting for you when you get home. Yay. And people who are farther away from Cincinnati, we're going to, if you're within, I'd say like 100 miles of Cincinnati, we're going to just drop them in the regular mail. If you live outside of that region, we're going to put them sort of 1 to 2 day priority. So you definitely get them by Friday. And you should keep your copies of the rubric and the proposals and bring them with you to the review session when you come.
And about how many proposals will each of us be reviewing?
Everybody gets between 9 and 11 proposals. We had 42 proposals total, and there are 4 regions. We had one applicant drop out after the letter of intent process, so we were down to 42. Where there's 2 zones that have 11 proposals each and 2 that have 10. But within those, there are some people with some conflicts of interest. So if you have a conflict of interest with one of the applicants, you will not be reviewing their proposal. So there's anywhere between 9 and 11 proposals. All right. Again, if you have any questions,
And so the first response you all expect from us is at the in-person meetings.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call, send me an email. Let me know what your questions are. And I, again, thank you so much for your time on this project. We really, really appreciate your time and effort and your thoughts on this. Thank you very much. And I will see all of you. I will be attending all of the in-person meetings, so I will get to see all of you in person later on this month. Thanks, guys.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.